Gosh, fantastic, Trishla, thank you. We have so much talent. She didn't start singing until last week. Thank you, that was awesome. Wow. I was having a conversation with a gentleman who's a businessman. He's actually in Seattle, but he works a lot with a lot of Asian organizations, and he was instrumental in my school getting a grant last year. And he was expressing to me some concerns in regards to sustainability and about, he has this phrase, he says, what's going to happen when you step in front of a beer truck? And la, 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 la. But it was interesting, the word sustainability, because he kept saying it over and over and over and over again. And I understand the term, and I know that you understand the term as well. But the more that I become conscious of language, conscious of intention, I move away from words like sustainability and I look for thrivability. Because what I know about the inherent nature of who we are is we don't want to just sustain, right? We want to thrive. And so listening is a key ingredient for any of us to be able to look at and to check in and to see where we are. And we've talked about that, and I was able to share that with him. And I had great respect because he's a man who travels all around the world constantly. He's constantly on the road, leading these major corporations and these big, big presentations talking about sustainability. And he stopped, and he paused, and he went, wow, I never thought about it that way before. Little old me here in Atlanta gave him an insight, and he said, I think I'm going to have to restructure the way in which I work. And I just was over the moon about that because what he showed me in that moment was that he was teachable. Here is a man whose accolades and success is a mile long, and saying that, and we agreed that we're going to figure out a way for us to get to Cambodia in November because we want to train. We want to train these people on thrivability and begin to look at a larger mission vision picture for the future. And so remaining teachable to me, I think it's not just vital, it's a part of our thrivability. And if what you and I are doing is becoming more conscious and more willing to embrace that particular role of us, not just as sustaining, not just as flatlining through life, not just getting by, but actually thriving, then there are key things that are impressed upon us in regards to being open. Our founder always used to say, be open at the top. I fantasize sometimes what it would be like if Ernest Holmes were still alive today, and what principles he might go, I'm done with that, and what other things he might embrace, because that's the sign of someone who is teachable. There are inherent truths meaning ceaseless, birthless, deathless truths that are forever, forever true. But then there are also the world of facts. And what we've come to learn about facts is that facts change, trends change, we change. And if we become so locked in and so rigid to facts rather than honoring truth, then we're sustaining rather than thriving. And so as I looked at that, and I thought about what does it mean to be teachable, I thought about the paradox of language, particularly for those of us who have an investment in our spirituality. Because you know the phrase know-it-all? People would say, don't be a know-it-all, right? Know-it-all. And from a human perspective, they're right. Because when we think that we know it all, we have immediately shut down. But from a spiritual perspective, what's the one thing we keep emphasizing over and over? We know it all. That there is a part of us, the soul part of us, that knows. In fact, we've often said, if in this moment you are seeking an answer and you don't know, there is a part of you that does know, right? And what does that mean? That means that within us, there is a connectivity to the all-knowing. So it is safe to say, I think it's accurate to say, from a spiritual standpoint, that you do know it all. But from a human perspective, we don't. From a human perspective, we are always in that perpetual motion of moving towards a greater degree of opening ourselves up to the spiritual knowing. And so the human knowing will never catch up to the spiritual knowing, nor should it. The human knowing, the human part of us that is forever, should be forever teachable. I just shit on you. Should be forever teachable. The human part of us that should be open to being teachable will never catch up to the spiritual knowing. And why is that? Because the spiritual knowing knows no bounds. It is not finite. It is infinite. It is the perpetuation of all of creation, that spiritual knowing. That's what is contained within us. So when we refuse to learn, when we think from an earthly perspective that I know it all, what are we actually doing to the spiritual knowing? We are closing and shutting down. Ernest Holmes said, stay open at the top. Open at the top. Be willing to throw out all systems that you have outgrown. Be willing to throw out whatever books, whatever information that may have served you at a different time period. Be willing to toss that out and to move on to be teachable to what is next. You know how we're always talking about purging? It's really good to purge your house, to clear, to get rid of the clutter. One of the key things that's vital in that decluttering is your bookshelf. Because if you go to look on your bookshelf and there are books about your codependency from 1980, I'm hoping by this point that maybe you have gained a little insight from that, and it's time to let that book go and to open up to a new pathway or a new method of something. And so to declutter, in a sense, is to be forever teachable, to allow something new to come in. So we do know it all. We know it all from a spiritual perspective. But our human knowing will always be striving to be in alignment with that. Remaining teachable then means, to me, when I was trying to define this, because to me it's such a large topic, but it has with it desire. To remain teachable means that you and I have to have a desire. And I broke that desire down into three components. One is to listen, one is to learn, and one is to apply the knowledge of what it is that we just listened and learned. So the desire to listen, and maybe you can relate, but have you ever been with people who they're just waiting for you to stop? They're not listening to what you're saying. They're just waiting for the breath, the pause, the period, in order for them to just continue on, right? And so there's no listening going on there. And we've all been there. We've all done that, and at times we still do. So there is a difference between, I guess you could say, passive listening and active listening. And passive listening is waiting for the other to finish so that we can get our opinion in, so that we can continue on our story. What you can consider today is that life is a conversation. Life is a conversation. What happens in a conversation? There has to be speaking, but there also has to be what? Listening. Listening and speaking. If life is a conversation, then it behooves us to move beyond just passive listening, waiting to speak, and learning how to actively listen. So passive listening, waiting for the other. And when we are passive listening, when we're just waiting to say our thing, this is what came to me today. We are speaking then from our old wounding. Think about that for a minute. Why would someone be so insistent on continuing to perpetuate whatever it is that they had to say, regardless of the information that might be in front of them or be coming to them from multiple sources, not listening? So they're speaking from what? And I wrote down they're speaking from their old wounding. What does it mean to speak from an old wound? It means that I wasn't heard. You weren't heard. And so we hold on to the idea of not being heard, and then for the remainder of our days, we will channel that energy towards being heard. And what happens is if we hold on to the idea, hear me, if you hold on to the idea of not being heard, then even when you are being heard, you don't know you're being heard. Ooh, that just hurt. Do you know what I mean by that? Because law tells us what? Whatever you believe becomes your reality. even when other things are trying to infiltrate that reality and bring a different result. If we still hold on to the old wound, then the old wound is all that we will experience. So someone who is passively listening, this is just my theory, but someone who just passively listens as a way of life is then walking around with an old wound and saying, you have nothing to share with me. You have no new information that is relevant for me. Let me tell you about my wound. And what ends up happening in that circumstance? If everything is energy, then that particular person, I think, exhibits what we call a repellent energy. And when there is a repellent energy, what do you want to do? You want to get the HE double hockey sticks out of Dodge, right? You want to do whatever you can to avoid that person. And again, the thing is, if we spot it, we got it. We all have, to some extent, some repellent energy. We all have, to some extent, a wound that is still alive. And even though the solution is there, we are neglecting the solution. So to be forever teachable means that we must become cognizant of the fact of moving away from passive listening to active listening. And what does it mean to actively listen? Well, what I've come to realize is that actively listening means that the conversation is constantly happening. So I might get my wisdom from a 5-year-old, not just an elder, not just a spokesperson in front of you, but that the information, the conversation is constantly taking place. This week I noticed the conversation is constantly taking place even through nature. Don't ask me why, but a whole nest of hawks have made our yard their home. So there is wah, 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 constantly. And I'm going, okay, I'm listening. It's fascinating. And they've gone from fledglings now to dive bombers. I mean, these guys are amazing. But they are, and so if you think of nature, if you think of life as a conversation, what does that mean? What is the totem of a hawk? So I look it up and because I want to be forever teachable, and like any bird of that nature, it's we are told that what it is doing is offering us to look at things from a higher perspective. When we're down here on the ground, we see certain things. You can't see the forest for the trees, and so what does hawk energy mean? I'm willing to be teachable. I love animal totems just like everybody else, right? You have your little your book that you open. And so to me, it's about how do you see the bigger picture? And what's going on in my life right now that I need to see a bigger picture? And so I meditate on that. I'm trying to be teachable. Last night, I'm walking the dogs. I always walk them sometime between 9 and 10, when the fireflies are at their height, because I'm fascinated by that. Trying to catch them. And so I'm walking the dogs, and for the first time since living in Georgia, we're on a street, mind you. We're on the street. Looks to be a stick, and the little one, Parker, goes over to smell the stick, and the stick moves. And it's a snake, and man, I'm pulling him away, and this snake is like, ah! And so what is a snake? I'm teachable. I'm listening. Nature is speaking. And I thought, do all snakes shed their skin? Google. Do all snakes shed their skin? Yes, all snakes shed their skin. And why do all snakes shed their skin? Because their skin structure doesn't have the same malleability as a human skin does. And so as they grow, they have no other recourse but to shed. And I'm thinking, wow, look at things from a higher perspective. Shed, what's going on here? So in my meditation, I'm thinking of these things, and I'm realizing that this is really great advice. If I listen. I believe that I was at my best listening when I was a child, particularly long before even elementary school started. You know how we really listen? I don't know if you can reflect back on that, but do you know how observant we were? We were so observant. We were hyper observant about our environment because we were in such hyperdrive learning mechanisms. And so we're listening, we're hearing. You know how you ever seen a child who speaks, your curse words back when no one else has been talking and they do it in public and you're embarrassed? Because we're like parrots, right? But I remember going and playing with some child down the street and listening to the child and the mother interact about cookies and the fact that they had cookies in their house and we didn't have cookies. And so listening about cookies and having a cookie and going, oh my God, my life just changed to having this cookie. And thinking, what do I need to do? And so from listening to that conversation about cookies and of how it's natural to have cookies, and if this house has cookies, then what does that mean? Every house on my street must have cookies. And so maybe the way you get cookies is you go door to door asking for cookies. And so as a child, hi, can I have a cookie? People I didn't even know. And much to my family's embarrassment, I became famous as the cookie boy. And the same question would always be asked of me, won't this spoil your appetite? And my immediate response was, it will spoil my appetite. And I think about that today, and I think about how I listened, and from listening gleaned an approach or a methodology in order to obtain what it is that I wanted. Would I do such a thing today? Probably not. That level of teachability might be shut down a little bit because of what? What other people will think. Imagine not caring what other people think. To me, that's a key ingredient in order to be teachable. So listening. The next, if we have a desire to listen, then there must be a desire to learn. Learning, to me, is the culmination and the continuation of why you and I are here. If the human component is trying to embody more of the spiritual component, then learning is something that never stops. Learning principles of living a vibrant life, a thrivability life. There was a song lyric that said, you and I were not born to just live. We were born to thrive and not just to survive. So what is the most important thing then, if you had to pick, what would you say is the most important thing about learning for you? Particularly from a spiritual perspective. What is it that we have come to learn? And to me, I think it's that our thoughts create. That we are creative beings, a part of a creative medium. And that whatever we focus on and whatever we choose becomes our reality. And so Michael Beckwith put it this way. He said that what you circulate returns to you. What you circulate returns to you. Now, not just in objects or things, but energy and thought. What you circulate returns to you. Where is our desire to learn about how to do that better? Where is our desire to learn about becoming so hyper-aware of what it is that we circulate? Because the word circulate comes from the root word circuit. That's what a circuit is, that which returns to its point of origin. And he put it this way, you and I get to keep that which we give away. Where are you in your desire to learn what it is that you're giving away? And how do we give away better? So if you and I give away judgment, we get to keep what? Judgment. Fun. Good times. And so judgment then becomes a vital part of our life. And I think that this key thing is so impactful in regards to living a conscious life. How do we have a desire to learn what it is in regards to circulation? And so, is there a difference then between judgment and observation? I think there is. I think that you and I can observe the world and not judge the world. But boy, to learn how to do that takes what? Practice. How do you and I learn to observe the world and all of its effects but not judge it? Because when you do not judge it, what are you then seeing in your observation? That God is all that there is, that there must be some perfection, even in the insanity of what is going on. And again, to be open at the top, to be teachable means that we must work on this consistently. I will just make a confession to you. My heart so hurt when I saw those people rejecting those children. Because, my opinion, it's not an immigration issue, it's a refugee issue. And that's different. And so knowing that those children are going to be sent back into an environment where they will either be abused or neglected or murdered or drugged or whatever it is, that doesn't feel good. And so in sitting with that, I go, how do I reconcile? How do I reconcile what I know spiritually with what I see physically? And I have to learn. I have to be willing to learn that there is reconciliation. There is reconciliation. There must be reconciliation, or why are we doing this? And so in my desire to learn more about how to do that, I have to move more towards observation rather than judgment. And in my observation, what are you and I called to do? We're called to go to that place, that stillness, that knowing, and to treat and affirm and see the highest and best. Not to just stand on the sidelines and wring our hands and go, isn't this awful? And then, if you feel called to do something on a tangible, physical level, then we go and we do that thing, but from a place of observation, not a place of judgment. There's a big difference. So I can observe, let's say, the influence of the poor choices that are being made from someone who uses drugs. I can observe that. How can I not judge that person? What's the difference? Because if I'm judging them, I am condemning them. But if I'm observing, I'm beginning to allow myself to look deeper beyond the drug use and go, there's pain there. There's pain there. And what do I get to do in regards to that pain? I get to send love. I get to do whatever it is. I can, not from a place of judgment, but having observed and then moved to a greater understanding. I can observe the attack of another, a verbal attack, a physical attack, and I can do the same thing. I can go to a place of observation of why that attack would take place rather than just judging the attacker, which goes nowhere. I can observe the hate speech and not be seduced and drawn in by it and judge it, because I can realize that for someone to go there, they must be in a lot of pain. And I can begin to see and know and feel and understand that Christ-like quality that sees the truth in all things. I can observe jealousy and mockery and even blatant lying. But if I linger then in the land of judgment of these people and take residency there, then I will begin to circulate. I will begin to circulate that judgment, and I will be just as they are. Because whatever we circulate, whatever we give away, we get to keep. Did you hear that? Whatever we give away, we get to keep. Whatever we circulate. So what do you want to circulate? I want to circulate understanding. I want to circulate compassion. I want to circulate love. And man, do I need to be forever teachable in those regards. Because there's a lot of times that I don't want to go there. I want to go to judgment because that's what feels familiar. And you and I are not here to do what is familiar. To be forever teachable is to become aware of, oh, I'm going there. Oh, I'm going there. Stop. And I begin to make a different choice, and I continue to learn what it is that I need to do in order to apply that. And the last one is the desire to apply. So it's not enough to just listen. It's not enough to just be willing to have a desire to learn. There must be a desire to apply. Think about that phrase, a desire to apply. I can't wait. I can't wait to implement this. I cannot wait to take these things and to put them into action by means of me. A desire to apply. Oddly enough, it was expressed by our founder, Ernest Holmes, with the word repression. Repression. You know what was so interesting? In looking in the back through the dictionary of words, the metaphysical words, the definition of repression took about a page and a half. But it's not the way you think of repression. He was talking about a spiritual repression or an energetic repression, much like physics. And I just lost the bookmark. Much like physics, meaning that when something is repressed or contained, like in a car carburetor or something, what happens when you take the lid off? And so there is a natural energetic repression within us. If we were like that carburetor. And what must happen is that the cap must be let off. And so what happens then is the action, the desire to apply, is the taking off of the cap of all those things that we've learned and observed and studied and letting those things out energetically so that we can begin to see how they do actually work, so that we can bring some validity to them. Repression then, in that spiritual context, leads to expression. And that's what you and I are here to do, is to express. To express all that is that we have listened to express all that is that we have learned. He said that people often become seething cauldrons within because of their inhibitions to express. Energy must have an outlet. Do you not agree? You are what? You are walking, breathing energy. You must have an outlet. You must have an outlet. But is your outlet judgment? Or is your outlet observation and love? And these are the things that you and I get to work on constantly in being forever teachable. He says the solution of the problem of desire is to transmit any destructive tendency into some form of action which is constructive. To be willing to understand and know that you have everything that is capable within you to make all of those things happen. So to be forever teachable means paying attention, listening, learning, and applying. I think it's no accident that tomorrow I leave for a ministers' conference that's all about how to be a better minister. And I've told myself, I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, and whatever speaks to me, I'm going to apply. I loved the instructions that says, this is not the type of conference that you'll be sitting in a hot tub or swimming in the pool. You will be in a classroom. Do not expect differently. I'm like, okay, reporting for duty. But I'm teachable. And so I'm going. And we'll see how that fares next week. And you can judge me. You can judge or observe my advancement. So being and remaining teachable, to me, is crucial for life. It's crucial for life, for any of us. They say the most dangerous words for any of us to say is, I know that already, from a human perspective. There is so much more out there. I invite you to close your eyes this morning, take a deep breath. I think it's no accident that they call it the still small voice. The still small voice, because the still small voice requires us to listen deeply. And in our listening, we are assured that the answer is there. And so our question today is this: where am I blocking my teachability? Where am I resistant and pushing away the lessons, the truth, the advancement, the solution that is so eagerly knocking on my heart's door? Where have I denied myself the vulnerability to say I'm sorry, to open up, to be the first to apologize, to be the one that says, I do not know, but I'm willing. I'm willing. Where is that part of us that desperately needs to soften so that we can apply and listen and learn? In a way that is in alignment with that which is God. So my prayer this morning is simply a prayer of affirming that we do not only recognize that, but we allow ourselves to do it, to embrace it, to become it. To walk out of here this morning with a willingness to be teachable. To be able to see the perfection in all things. And to know that this outcome of learning has been waiting for us to recognize it for so very long. And that the next level of unfoldment of our good is right here, and it happens the moment that we say yes. So we say yes to our teachability today. And as we affirm this, I know that in its right and perfect way, it makes its way to the hearts and to the minds of everyone here today, to those who are listening, to those who might listen to this afterwards. It is perpetual. The invitation and the conversation is constant. And we give thanks for life and for being here in this space and in this time where we can hear such things and we can open ourselves up to these ideas, and we can know that we have yet begun to scratch the surface of what it is that we have come here to learn. So from that place of humbleness and vulnerability and willingness, we simply give gratitude for the infinite creative medium that has brought us to life, and for the opportunities that lay before us. And in this space of gratitude and thanksgiving, we let it be, and we release it now into the beautiful law, knowing that to the degree of our willingness is the degree in which these lessons present themselves. And we say welcome and thank you. And together we say, and so